Another one of the requirements in our project is to use sound in some kind of dynamic way to indicate that the user is getting near or further away from some kind of target in this kind of weird contrived game we have. So I'm going to use the sound of a heartbeat, which I found on the internet. Let's see, come over here. I'm going to drag this in to our assets. So I'm going to have a little heartbeat sound in here. There's the heartbeat there. I'm going to drag that heartbeat into the scene, and you'll notice that it creates an audio source for me. It's going to say play on awake, and I'm going to set it to loop. So now the moment I start the game, we should hear the heartbeat. Okay, now, first thing I'm going to do to make this easier to deal with, I'm going to set this to linear roll-off. And this is important because I just want it to be a really simple relationship between the position of the player and where the sound is. Now, we're doing this in this example, we're doing it by brute force. So we're not using a lot of the built-in features of Unity, I know, but we're going to do it by brute force. Now, I'm using the north and south buttons in this game to move the player up and down, or I'm increasing and decreasing the Y value. There'd also be a east and west, and that move our position in terms of X, but we'll save that for a second. Instead, we'll come here, and I'm going to set the initial volume to 0, the initial volume of the sound. Okay. Now, let's go to the script, and the script is in the player object. We're going to double-click on that. And you'll see here this user input. That's where the player is actually moving. All right. So what I want to do is I'm going to set a position, and we'll start off with some kind of let's see, the player's position is the middle. So we'll set the target position to let's see. We're going to move Y is up and down, so we'll set that to, say, 15. Okay? And the player's allowed to move anywhere between -20 and 20, so 15 is valid. Okay? Volume starts off at 0. Then I'm going to say every time the player moves, I'm going to take that position, the new position. I'm going to use something called distance. Let's see, I'm going to create a float that's going to be dist. Right? And down here, after the player gets to move, I'm going to say dist equals, I'm going to say vector2, those are the types of vectors I'm using, dot distance. And I'm going to take the player's position and the target position. I'm going to take the difference of that. Okay? Now, the maximum distance that the player could be from the target, well, let's imagine the player was at one side. So it would have, actually, the playfield is 40 by 40, so we'd say 40 squared. So I guess here'd be the maximum distance. The maximum distance would be 40 squared plus 40 squared, and the square root of that. We'd just take Pythagorean theorem. That would be like the opposite side of the spectrum altogether, right? So 40 squared, 40 squared times 40 squared is what, 1600, right? Am I getting that right? Oh, 40 times 40 is 1600. So we want to get the square root of 3200. Can I do that here? Square root? Calculate that there? I don't know. Anyway, I don't have a calculator handy, do I? No, I do. So, views, scientific. All right. So I'm going to say 3200, and we're going to take the square root of that. So 56, that's our maximum value. So we'll say something volume equals 1.0f minus 1.0f. Is that 0? 0 minus our distance divided by 56. Is that the value we got? Isn't that the value? I think. Did I close the calculator? I sure did, didn't I? All right. Well, let's assume 56 was a good value. So, and we don't really want this. I don't know what it did this. Anyway, I'm going to have to, let's tell it, let's find the game object. So we're going to say public game object heartbeat. Okay. And then so down here, we're going to say heartbeat dot find component, or sorry, get component. And we're going to be getting the audio source. And we're going to set the volume equals that. Okay. Heartbeat, get component, audio source. That's the type of the component we're going to get. And set the volume to 1 minus the distance. So as the distance gets further away, this number will get smaller. The closer it gets, distance is going to go to 0. And that will become 1. So the volume will increase. All right. So let's save that script. Now we have the heartbeat over here. Now we need to connect the heartbeat to that script. Right? So if we go to the player object script, you'll see there's heartbeat here, and there's no game object associated with it yet. So we'll say drag this one over to there. Okay, we could have also clicked on that and chosen heartbeat within the scene, but you see it's already set. Now, if all goes right, if I have this done correctly, let's clear our things here. Well, let's see if we hear the heartbeat. So we're starting off, we're pretty far away. Where did we say the heartbeat was? So we were pretty near it. Let's go down here. So now we're pretty far away from it. Now, realistically, I think 56 is a little bit, it's not enough of a value. That'd be like the really, really, really extreme cases. So for our use, I'm going to cut that actually in half. I'm going to say that the value is, well, we'll divide it by 20. And just to make this work, I'm also going to say math F. I'm going to use our friend the math F library, and we're going to say clamp. I'm going to clamp that value between 0 and 1. Okay. So this way we know we're going to wind up with a value that works. So we calculate the value, clamp it between 0 and 1, and away we go. All right, so if the distance becomes really, really, really small, that should work. And if it winds up being bigger than 1, it'll still be 1, so it'll max out. So anyway, let's see if that works. All right, move south. I'm moving away from it. Let's move towards it. It's at 15, right? You can see at 20, it's dropped off again. All right, and I could further tune it. I could say, well, let's see. Maybe divided by 20 isn't enough. Maybe divided by 10. It's basically how close do we want to be when we start to hear it? So if I want to say, well, I'm actually, 5 away, so I'm going to be pretty close to it before I start hearing something. I'm going to set 5 there. So So let's hear how that sounds. Let's restart it. All right, whoops, clear there. And let's see if this works. All right. So we're gonna get here, we should start hearing it. Now we're right on top of it, and we passed it. So we sort of brute forced the audio to be dynamic based on our distance from our player. Now, for the heck of it, if you want to stay tuned in, I'm going to go ahead, and I've got the north and south buttons here. So why don't I go ahead and just to step through the whole process again for anyone who hasn't quite gotten it yet, we'll create a UI button, and we'll call this button, we'll call it East, and we will change the text on that button to say East. Okay, and so let's move East, the East, whoa, not the text, but the East button up here, and we'll take the South button and we'll move it down there. So we're gonna do a little user interface design. We'll take this toggle button. We haven't really done anything with the toggle button. We'll leave it over there. And we'll take the North button and we'll move it up a little bit. So normally we should check, on a, say, 4:3 screen, how's this gonna look? Is it all fitting? Yeah, it's all fitting. So that's all right. It's not great. This is not a great user interface. So it's just for demo purposes, as they say. So we have an East button. Now we need to make the East button do something. So if we looked at the script over here, we see we had East, and that's going to be an X. X is going to get added. So East, we need to pass the user input function of the player. We need to pass it a 3. So the way we do that, click on our East button here. We're going to say, on click event, the object that we're dealing with is going to be our player object, right? Our player object. And the function that we're going to call is the player script user input. And we're going to pass it a value of 3. Okay? And we're also going to take that one, copy it, paste it, and make a West. So West will be over here. We will rename this one West. And we're going to make sure that the button says West. And because we went ahead and did a copy and paste, you'll see that this on-click event is already set up. It's pointing at the player object. It's pointing at the user input. The one thing we have to change is that value. It needs to become 2. So we hit play. We're going to move East, West, South, North. Now you'll notice if I move East or West, it's not printing out the change in value. We're only seeing what the Y value is. But you can definitely hear how it's impacting the overall sound there. All right, so that's how we would use the sound in there. And if I'm feeling up to it, I might do one more video in a little bit. So we'll post this one for now. Hopefully it helps.